Going to talk about some 50-50 fights, I believe, at least in my opinion. Some of you guys might have different opinions about it, but we're going to talk about some 50-50 upcoming fights that I really want to talk about with you guys. And then on top of that, on upcoming this year, that is. And also I want to talk some other fights that I think are very interesting, very good fights for this year. So we're getting into it. I'm doing, if you haven't realized, I'm actually going through welterweight champions, a series of welterweight champions questions. So you can check the community section for that. All the welterweight champions, you like 120 plus welterweight champions over 130 something years of boxing. So I'm gonna be asking you guys a lot of questions on that. We'll stay in the welterweight division. We're really basically talking about welterweight champions, and that will set the tone for when I do put out the stream where we will actually have an online discussion about the greatest welterweight champions of all time. But first of all, I want you guys to get familiar with who all of the welterweight champions were to start with over 130 plus years. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So when you look in the community section, as you look through my channel, that's what we'll be looking at. All right, this upcoming weekend, Anthony Joshua is going to be facing Alexander Usyk. And I believe that's a 50-50 fight in my opinion. I'm not sure who would win the fight. By the way, the profile picked for this video is actually two welterweights going at it. It was two welterweight champions. They kind of had a rivalry between them, and their fights would go one way or the other. So if you guys know who those two welterweight champions are, please put it in the chat section right here. Okay, rolling on. So yeah, I'm gonna just tell you the 3 fights this year that I think are 50-50 fights. You might sway it one way or the other, but I'm not really sure how these fights are gonna pan out. So Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk. A lot of people saying Joshua's gonna win. I'm guessing he's the favorite going in because he's the bigger guy. I don't think that's going to win him the fight, because Usyk's a guy who can really box. So he and Michael Hunter are a problem for the heavyweight division, and we will see what really transpires with that. Oh, my eyes are red. Interesting. I must be sleepy. The other 50-50 fight is Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant. And I know a lot of people underestimate Caleb Plant, and he will show you why you shouldn't underestimate him. But that's, to me, a 50-50 fight as well this year. And what I like about 50-50 fights is they get me very excited for the fact that I don't know who's exactly going to win. I may have some idea, but in this case, I don't really know who's going to win between Caleb Plant and Canelo. Yes, Canelo has experience with Canelo, but Caleb Plant has a lot of skills and abilities in it, and he has a lot of knowledge and know-how. So I can't really say. And the last 50-50 fight for this year is going to be Porter versus Terrence Crawford. Sean Porter versus Terrence Crawford, I think, is a 50-50 fight. That fight could go any which of many ways. So, and based on Porter's history, we know Crawford's in for a tough fight. Whether he's up to the challenge or not, we will see. I don't know. Now, there's some other fights I'm looking forward to seeing that I think are really good fights. Joette Gonzalez versus Navarette. That's going to be October the 15th. By the way, Canelo versus Caleb Plant is going to be in November the 6th. And Porter versus Crawford is November the 20th. So not but another week. I believe 2 weeks after Canelo versus Plant, we're going to get Crawford versus Porter. So that's great. And Porter is the number 4 ranked welterweight in the welterweight division by the ring. Canelo versus Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant is like the second best super middleweight in the division, so Canelo's going to be facing him. And then Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk. Alexander Usyk is a pound-for-pound fighter. I guess Anthony Joshua is too. So these are really big fights. And I must say, you can look at them several different ways. Different people are going to have different opinions about them, but I just think they are 50-50 fights straight down the center. That's what I call them. Might lead to good rivalries too if the guys just decide to, depending on how dominant one fighter is over the other. But yeah, Joette Gonzalez versus Navarette. That's August the 15th, and that looks like a pretty good fight. As well as Bryant Jennings versus Oscar Rivas. That's going to be an interesting fight, October 22nd. Of course, Jamal Herring versus Shakur Stevenson. Even though I favor Stevenson to get the nod, I mean, this is still a very exciting championship fight for Stevenson, and Jamal Herring is no pushover. And they're both southpaws, so that should be a very interesting fight in and of itself. I'm very excited to see that. Dillian White versus Otto Wallen. That's another very interesting fight. I would love to see. Otto Wallen's a southpaw, obviously. He is proving himself by stopping Dominic Brazil. He showed that he's a force to reckon with. Dillian White also shows that. So I would love to see what happens, and that's October 30th. So next month's loaded. Next month we got Gonzalez versus Navarette. We got Jenkins versus Rivas. We got Herring versus Stevenson. We got White versus Wallen. Okay, all of those fights happen next month, including Lopez versus Carambosas. Right, Lopez versus Carambosas. Fury versus Wilder is also next month. So it's all those fights are there. Now I'm not really so excited for Lopez versus Carambosas or Fury versus Wilder, but who knows? It might sneak up something on us. And then we got Usyk versus Benavidez, which will be November the 13th. I'm just curious about this because Usyk opponent that faced Caleb Plant, and he was undefeated at the time when he faced Caleb Plant. He was beating everybody, mowing everybody down. Caleb Plant really just kind of demolished him. He didn't get him out of there, but he demolished him. And I want to see if Benavidez can do that or something even worse. I mean, styles make fight, though. Then you have Chazor versus Parker. And that's a very good fight because Chazor, he's improving as a fighter and, just showing more knowledge, more flexibility, more variety in his skill set. Parker, I haven't really seen him a lot lately, so I'd like to see how, former world champion, of course. So I'd like to see how Chazor does against Parker. I really would. December the 18th. And Chazor's boxing has gotten even better over time. And then, of course, Fulton versus Figaro. That'll be December the 31st. I definitely want to see that. Omar Figueroa's brother, Brandon Figueroa, is going to be facing Stephen Fulton. I think Stephen Fulton has all the skills in the world. But Brian Figueroa, he brings the heat and he brings it nonstop. So this should be an interesting fight to see how Stephen Fulton handles that situation. So there's all these fights that are coming up at the end of this year. I'm excited about those are the fights that I'm excited about. There are some other fights, but I'm not excited about those. But I'm excited about these fights. And of course, in the women's section, we haven't really had a lot of fights finalized. I don't know who Clarissa Shields will be facing next. But and Katie Taylor or Amanda Serrano. Amanda Serrano this year, we had some fights that came off this year, and Amanda Serrano, she had faced her opponent and demolished her quite easily. So let me tell you the kind of fights that we've already had this year. And remember, we had COVID this year. We had Manny Pacquiao versus Ordenis Ugas, and Ordenis Ugas pulled the upset on Manny Pacquiao. We also had Guillermo Rigondeaux versus John Rael Casimiro. Casimiro got the nod on that one. And then we had this fight, Jamal Charlo versus Brian Castano. And I think they want to do a rematch. But I think Castano, I don't know what's going on with Castano or with Charlo. But what I can say is that Brian Castano, I thought won that fight against Jamal Charlo. Anyway, nonetheless, it was kind of, I guess they judged it as a 50-50 fight because Charlo came on strong in the end. Obali versus Nolito Donaire, another shocking upset. Donaire knocking out Obali to become the WBA, I believe, or it's not WBA, I'm not sure which one it is. But it's one of those belts that he won, and so he's a champion right now. I think he's WBC champion. I'm not mistaken. He's WBC. And then Luis Neri was knocked out by Brandon Figueroa. So that was a little bit of a shocker. And we also had Jerome Ennis, who beat the brakes off of Sergio Lipinus, who was the regular WBA champion. I'm not sure if he gave up his belt or what happened, but Yeah, Jeronis knocked him out. And let's not forget, we also had Virgil Ortiz versus Cavalliasquez, and he stopped him too. So all of that happened this year in boxing, and that's just to tell you how much boxing we've had this year. And I'm really happy about that because at least we have sports this year. Last year it was pretty dead until coming down to the end of the year. So there's been a lot more boxing. Things are still very difficult to still get the fights put together. They're not as easy as before COVID. But looking forward to seeing more of these fights come together. Leave in the comment section a fight that you may want to see, or the fight that I may have missed that you saw that was a really good fight as well. And what you need out. Peace, guys.